Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu.
Early voting is over. Now it's on to mini Super Tuesday. Welcome to a special edition of Balance of Power. We're live in Georgia, one of 6 states holding primary elections tomorrow, with 2 of the most competitive races in the country happening right here in Georgia. Joining this hour on the campus of Georgia Tech, our host for this week, the school's president, Angel Cabrera. We'll also talk with former Atlanta Mayor Shirley Franklin, and later this hour, a special conversation that you won't want to miss. Award-winning artist and political activist Killer Mike is going to be with us right here on our Atlanta set. And we start, as always, with a look at Wall Street. Let's bring in Charlie Pellet. He's at World Headquarters in New York with the latest on the Monday trade. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there, Joe Mathieu. And right now we are looking at an update for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. It has been a volatile trading session as I speak. We've got the Dow now lower by 4 points. A little change, key takeaway at least for the Dow right now. S&P does remain in the red, down 25. The S&P 500 index at 73.83. This after hitting 7,500 last week. Right now the S&P is down 0.3%. NASDAQ, the composite index, trading lower by 184 points right now. For NASDAQ, a decline of 0.2%. We've got the VIX just above 18 with a 10-year currently yielding 4.59%, the 2-year 4.07%, and the 30-year 5.12%. Gold up 0.2%, 45.49 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.3%, 106.79 a barrel. Barrel of Brent right around $111 now for Brent crude. That is a gain of 1.6%. The U.S. is expected to issue a waiver allowing the sale of Russian crude oil and petroleum products that are already loaded on tankers. It is day 3 of the LIRR strike. Long Island commuters had to navigate congested roads and packed buses this morning. It'll likely be the same for the ride home. MTA Chair and CEO Janno Lieber spoke on Bloomberg this morning about the ride-in for commuters.
The turnout at our shuttle bus locations has been pretty light. So people who have to come into the city are getting there. And the subway service from the Queens subway stations where people are being dropped off has been fantastic. So far so good, but it's the first day, and you know we would like to resolve this issue and restore Long Island Railroad service.
MTA Chair Janno Lieber interviewed this morning on surveillance. President Trump, meanwhile, telling the New York Post that Iran, quote, knows what's going to be happening soon after the president huddled with his national security team. Again, crude oil, WTI, up 1.4%, 106.80 at a barrel. Barrel of Brent just below 111 right now at 110.92. Barrel of Brent up by 1.5%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcast. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Charlie Pellet will have more on the markets coming up in just about 15 minutes time here on Balance of Power. It's great to have you with us on the Monday edition. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, where you can find us right now by searching Bloomberg Business News Live, you realize we're somewhere a bit different. Indeed, we've made tracks to Atlanta, Georgia for primary coverage tomorrow, and it's going to be taking up some time here the next few days as we look at this state and 5 others holding primary elections. This is the big one, though, and we wanted to get on the ground in Georgia to explore some of the political issues that are driving what was a record turnout in early voting. 1 million people for the first time ever in a midterm cycle voting ahead of time here in Georgia. Early vote just ended Friday. And we've got 2 incredibly close races that will likely head to runoffs here. Of course, statewide races will be decided across the board, but it's the Senate primary we're watching to find out who's going to run against Jon Ossoff. That will likely go to a runoff. And then, of course, who will replace Governor Kemp here in Georgia? An open race, massive field on both sides, again, will likely go to a runoff. When we consider the political landscape, though, and the issues that are driving the debate here in Georgia, knowing that we are here on the campus of Georgia Tech, we wanted to get in the heads of young people as well. It was Democrats by 15% who drove that early turnout record. And now that they get into the summer season here, it's a very interesting time to talk to people who are coming out of school, who are going into an ever-changing job market and dealing with a very challenging economy. $4.50 gas in many places, and artificial intelligence that's changing the job landscape before our eyes. This is why we wanted to spend some time with our host this week at Georgia Tech. Angel Cabrera is president of the Georgia Institute of Technology. It's great to see you. Welcome to Bloomberg.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me.
How would you start by answering that question? This class that just left, and I know that you've got a group of summer session students on campus now, are going into a world that you and I would not recognize when we think back to when we stepped out of college, and you start, very cute to think about mailing resumes around. AI is gobbling up jobs. It's making other jobs more efficient. And it's more difficult to be a young person, to fill a car with a tank of gas, or to buy a home.
Well, it is. You are absolutely right. This is one of the biggest inflection points driven by technology that any of the, probably the classes going back to the turn of the century with the internet revolution.
Yeah.
Maybe we haven't experienced anything like this. And yes, it creates uncertainty, creates a little bit of fear among this graduating class. But honestly, it also generates a huge opportunity. And obviously at Georgia Tech, we are a technology oriented and centered university. We make sure that no matter what your major is, that you will be able to fully leverage the tools of AI. That's our goal.
Okay.
I want to make sure no one graduates Georgia Tech without really being able to fully leverage those tools.
Sure.
But it is creating a lot of uncertainty, for sure.
It's really interesting. You use the word fear. I keep hearing anxiety. Right, if you're stepping out into the job market right now, but you could also argue that that makes a higher education ever more important.
Absolutely. In fact, if you live in a world like we live now, where the computer can code better than the human, or can write, or can do research, can write a report, can create a PowerPoint, can do all these things better than the human, then the question of what does the human do? Well, you better be able to ask the right questions, to have the capacity to critically analyze the answers, to have really a great understanding of the world we live in, or of the mission of your business, of how you're going to be competing. So all those, if you will, are questions that lie outside of technology, that have to do with understanding the broader picture. So what we're trying to do is make sure, yes, that you can use those tools, that they're part of your learning, but at the same time that we help you grow and be able to ask those bigger questions.
Sure. You know, there was a debate about whether kids should just go to trade school to, get a certification, get a paying job, as opposed to the old liberal arts education. If we're vibe coding everything now, does the liberal arts education reemerge as a primary course?
I think it does.
Yeah?
I think it does, as long, and this is the key, as long as you are able to fully leverage the tools of AI.
Okay.
And that is our goal.
So you keep going back to the tools of AI. Yeah. I remember when I was first pointed to the internet as a graduating college kid, because that was I had never seen the internet before. And schools quickly realized they had to get people online now, and to your point, teach them how to use these tools. How do you do that when it comes to AI, when there are so many competing platforms and a technology that's developing so quickly? This isn't like going on Alta Vista and doing your first internet search.
AI is new, but the problem that you describe is not new. For years, every student at Georgia Tech has had to take a coding class. And you would say, why would an economics major have to take a coding class?
Right.
Because the way you do economic analysis at this time of in this era is by using and fully leveraging the tools of computing. Same thing happens here. We don't need everybody to study computer science. We want you to study biology or history or economics or public policy, civil engineering, whatever you're passionate about. But we will make sure that by the time you graduate this place, you are ready to fully and responsibly leverage the tools of AI, plus all the knowledge of your discipline.
So is AI changing the way you use a classroom? Is it changing the way you teach a course on the college level?
AI is changing everything.
Okay.
Think about it. If you were teaching computer science 3 years ago, you would teach an algorithm, you would teach data structures, and you say, okay, by Monday, I want you to code a program that does X.
Yes.
That doesn't work anymore because
Right.
you can just cut and paste into Claude and it will produce the answer. So it is forcing us to rethink how we teach everything, but not to see AI as the enemy, but to see it as this incredibly powerful creative tool. It is forcing us to raise the level of the thinking and the analytical competence of our students.
Fascinating. Yeah, if you assign a paper to a student,
same thing.
They crank it out of an LLM and hand it back to the teacher. How do you teach that student in that world?
Well, in fact, we have, for example, a writing seminar. It doesn't matter whatever major you do, you have to do a writing seminar. Until now, used to be you just write every week, you get feedback on that paper. What we're now assuming is that we're not saying you cannot use AI. We're assuming you're going to use AI, but our expectations of quality of what you produce are a lot higher than they were 3 years ago.
Yeah, I was fascinated to learn that Georgia Tech is the second largest recipient of federal research grants. We've seen these grants challenged in this administration. The Doge effect was very real, and I'm wondering what it has meant for your campus.
Fortunately, Georgia Tech has fared very well. We are indeed, I mean, just 7 years ago, we were number 9 in federal research grants. We're now number 2.
Yeah.
Our volume of research keeps growing, but it is a policy issue that affects us very, very directly. I mean, right now, if you look at right behind us, that skyline did not exist in Atlanta 20 years ago. Some of that didn't even exist 10 years ago. The reason why Atlanta is growing is because of the innovation, entrepreneurial energy that is coming out of Georgia Tech. That is the driver of all that activity. The fuel of that is research funding, most of that coming from the federal government. So we do hope that whoever is in Congress, whoever is in the capacity to influence that we remember that the future of our country, if we're going to win, if we're going to beat China, we better be investing in the basic research that is the fuel of the whole enterprise.
Fascinating. You're running an academic institution here, but it's actually a massive business, and your input costs are higher than ever. What do $100 a barrel oil, $4 a gallon gas mean for this institution? Because it's bleeding through into everything, including food. Your room and board doesn't cost what it did even months ago.
Inflation is never fun to deal with, and of course it's affecting us. We have several things going for us. First is the state of Georgia has been a very generous investor in higher education. I'll tell you, the appropriation that Georgia Tech receives now is more than twice what it was when I showed up 7 years ago. We're also bigger, and because we're bigger, we have economies of scale. So we've been able to fend that inflation and still reduce our tuition and fees, which is very rare in American higher education. If inflation keeps growing, I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that. We may need to put a little bit pressure on tuition. That may be inevitable.
Boy, that's a very honest answer in a world where some people are questioning the value of a college education, the return on investment. How do you answer that?
Very often, when I read an article that is critical about the value of higher education, is written by someone who went to a very nice school.
Of course.
And when I ask the authors, would you suggest to your own children that they forego higher education? They say, no. It's like, then why? What's the argument? That someone else's kids don't go to higher education?
Or we're all going to go to community college, is what we hear.
The value of a Georgia Tech degree, we're very proud, is one of our top objectives. We right now provide the highest return on investment of any college in America, any public university in America. We're very, very proud of that. But really, when you look at the value that an average college degree, with some exceptions, but the average college degree delivers, it's one of the safest investments anybody, any family can make.
It's great to meet you. Thank you for coming on Bloomberg to talk to us today. He's the president and our host this week here on the campus of Georgia Tech, the president, Angel Cabrera. We thank you so much. I'm Joe Mathieu here in Atlanta with a special edition of Balance of Power on this Monday, with our eyes still, as always, on Washington and Wall Street. And we just want to take a couple of minutes to update what's happening at the White House. Our Washington correspondent, Tyler Kendall, is live in our Washington bureau right now. Tyler, we've got eyes on the strait that, of course, remains closed today. And the president is threatening Tehran once again on social media, saying the clock is ticking. They better get moving fast. There won't be anything left of them. Do we have a new timeline?
Well, Joe, at this point, it's very clear that the White House's patience is wearing thin. In fact, President Trump just telling the New York Post in an interview released moments ago that he's not frustrated with Iran, but he's not going to make concessions related to Iran's nuclear program. This says the progress still remains gridlocked over a potential deal. And we're getting some breaking news within the last hour from the U.S. Treasury Department. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirming that the U.S. will issue a temporary 30-day waiver for some Russian barrels that are already at sea, underscoring the supply crunch that we're seeing from the Iran war. In fact, people familiar with the matter do tell Bloomberg News that it is very possible that this temporary waiver could be extended as the conflict drags on. That is, of course, adding pressure to the scenario for this White House, which has long maintained that a diplomatic solution is still viable, though we do know that President Trump is slated to convene his national security team tomorrow to look at potential military options, because at this point we haven't really seen much progress. In fact, we are hearing that the U.S. naval blockade has only expanded, as CENTCOM Joe within the last hour confirmed that so far 85 commercial vessels have been turned away as part of the U.S.'s efforts to secure the strait.
Really interesting. Tyler, we know the president spent some time at the golf club in Virginia with his military advisors yesterday, including the Secretary of State and the CIA director. And tomorrow he'll be back in the Situation Room with military officials to presumably run through the options that he has at this point. Do we have any sense of what that conversation will include?
Well, the reporting at the moment and President Trump's own statements, including his increased threats on social media, do imply that U.S. military action could be on the table. At this point, though, we haven't gotten confirmation on exactly what would happen if the White House does pursue this route, but does underscore the growing frustration that the White House has when it comes to these negotiations. So far, we've only heard from Iranian state media about where the latest proposals stand, including Iran state media reporting earlier today that the U.S. had agreed to lift or ease some sanctions on Iranian crude temporarily while they hammer out the rest of a deal. We can say that a senior White House official is telling Bloomberg News that that report is false, though hasn't provided any additional information. Pair that with other reporting, again from Iranian state media over the weekend, that the latest U.S. proposal included non-starters for Iran, including that there would be no payments for damages related to the war, and that the U.S. would seek to unfreeze less than a quarter of Iran's currently frozen assets. Again, at this point, we haven't heard from the U.S. side when it comes to these specific points, whether or not they were included in any potential proposal. All we know at the moment is that President Trump is very unhappy with the counter-proposal that Iran has put forward. So a lot of moving headlines here, but at the moment still seeing this escalation when it comes to regional allies. Joe, important to point out that the UAE over the weekend confirmed that a drone hit one of its power plants, and Saudi Arabia said overnight that it intercepted multiple projectiles that had entered into its airspace.
Lot to cover with Tyler Kendall. Tyler, thank you so much for the update. Our Washington correspondent. Live in the nation's capital, I'm Joe Mathieu in Atlanta. We're live on the campus of Georgia Tech on this primary eve in Georgia. Coming up, the former mayor of Atlanta, Shirley Franklin, will join us right here on the set on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
It's 121 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Dow Industrials continue to advance. So right now the Dow is up 70, higher by 0.1%, trading below 50,000, 49,600 on the Dow. The S&P 500 index is moving lower, down now by 0.3%. S&P 73.38. We've got NASDAQ trading lower as well right now, retreating further from last week's records, down 190 now. For NASDAQ, that is a drop of just about 0.7%. All of this with the VIX holding above 18, a 10-year at 4.59%, the 2-year 4.07%, and the 30-year currently yielding 5.13%. Gold is up 0.3%, 45.52 the ounce, while West Texas Intermediate crude oil 106.65 a barrel, up 1.2%. Barrel of Brent right now at $110.50. Brent crude up by 1.1%. Home builder sentiment rebounded in May, but does remain low overall as affordability concerns continue to weigh on the outlook. An index of market conditions from the National Association of Home Builders and Wells Fargo did increase 3 points to 37. However, a value below 50 means more builders see conditions as poor than good. And among home builders, Toll Brothers up now by 1%, Lennar up 2.6%, Pulte up now by 2.1%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcast. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that Joe Mathieu in Atlanta is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, you can still get down here. We're going to be here for 3 days. We're cooking in hot Atlanta. It is pretty warm out, as a matter of fact, as we get into the 80s here on the campus of Georgia Tech, exactly the way we would have wanted it to be here on this day before the primary in Georgia and in 5 other states. It's going to think of it as a mini Super Tuesday tomorrow. We'll be talking about that a lot more. Of course, Kaylee Lines, by the way, is on her way right now from the nation's capital. Will be joining me on the late edition of Balance of Power. That starts at 5 p.m. Eastern. With much more on the races. We're specifically looking very closely at primaries for the Senate race, who's going to run against Jon Ossoff, and for governor, as Brian Kemp is term limited. And we've got a wide open field on both sides with a lot of issues to consider. We spend so much time talking about the economy when we're in Washington. That's no different here as we look at crude oil prices in the triple digits. And of course, a gallon of gas ever more expensive at $4.50. And that's no different here in Georgia. And on this campus, as we discussed with Angel Cabrera, the president of Georgia Tech, this is a very real situation for students who are graduating and walking into a, in many cases, unrecognizable job market with the impact of AI colliding with the cost of living. It's where we start our conversation with the former mayor of this great city. Shirley Franklin is with us on our set, was mayor of Atlanta from 2002 to 2009. We just had a chance to meet, and I appreciate your coming to see us here on the campus of Georgia Tech. Welcome to Bloomberg.
Welcome to Atlanta.
Well, thank you. I'm going to have a couple of pointers from you later on. You can tell me where to go for dinner tonight and all the rest of it, but I want to talk politics first. And what is on the minds of people in Atlanta as they prepare to vote? We were really taken by a record turnout in early voting. I don't know if you were as well, with 1 million people. And a lot of Democrats, 15% more Democrats than Republicans, making up the difference. What does that tell you about this current state of affairs?
It tells me, number one, that early voting matters to people. They want a chance to vote and not stand in long lines on Election Day. But it also tells me that people are paying attention to what's going on in the country and in the state. They are more informed, thanks to you and other folks who are talking about the issues, and that they want to be heard. I'm not as surprised by the turnout. I think the level of discussion and debate about public issues is higher now than it has been in recent years.
How much of that has to do with the Trump administration?
Well, I don't worry so much about motivation. I mean, as a former elected official and city official, I just deal with what is in the present. So maybe it has to do with the Trump administration. Maybe it has to do with the Supreme Court. Yeah. The changes in Roe v. Wade, the situations around immigration. There are many immigrants in Georgia. In 1996, there were very few immigrant populations that were active politically. I've worked for the Olympics, and we used to calculate those things. Yes. So now the immigrant populations are much larger. They have a point of view, a position, and many of them are naturalized citizens and want to express themselves.
That's all fascinating. We're also in a midterm cycle. Sometimes people stop paying attention when you're between presidential elections. Does that say more about Georgia, or the city of Atlanta, or the political climate that we're in?
Well, I'll leave it to you to tell me what's going on nationally. All right. I will tell you that Georgia is a fast-growing state. It is a state that has a history of political engagement through the civil rights movement, at least, but even before that. So the people are used to being a part of politics. Atlanta elected the first African-American mayor of a southern city in the 1970s, the first African-American congressman in Andrew Young. So this is not news to us. We're used to being engaged, and we're used to being engaged in a bipartisan way. And whites and blacks, and now other people are used to being on both sides or either side. So I'm not surprised by the engagement.
You know, it's interesting. I love talking to mayors because mayors do not have the luxuries that lawmakers have. You have to fix things. You have to deal with potholes. You got to deal with constituents. You have to deal with the realities on the ground. And you keep coming around to making that point. It's a rare breed in politics. How come we don't have people like that in Washington?
Well, we should have more mayors who are elected to Congress.
Well, I guess
mayor,
maybe that's the answer.
Well, maybe even a president. We have had several mayors that have considered it. Buttigieg.
That's right.
Was a former mayor and very successful mayor, one that we all got to know and love. So I think I would say to you that you mentioned all the things that mayors do, but if you knew me, you would know that you would be talking about water and sewer.
Yes.
I'm the sewer mayor. I believe strongly in investing in infrastructure, and that doesn't have a party.
Right, exactly. It gets back to running a city without the luxuries of going into open debate or being a partisan. It's difficult to run a city on that level, certainly in a place like Georgia. So talk to me about what happens tomorrow, because we've got two big races, two big transitions taking place. The biggest one is the governor. Say what you will about Brian Kemp, love him or hate him. This is going to be a tough, drawn-out race and likely the most expensive in Georgia's history. Are you ready for this transition?
Well, it's way too expensive.
Way too expensive.
Way too expensive. But it's great that there are contenders on both sides, in the Republican and the Democratic side. I'm a Democrat, so I'm paying most attention to the Democratic primary. And our former mayor has been polling really strongly, as have several other of the candidates. But we have 7 candidates who are running for governor.
Sure do.
And most people believe that we're going to have a runoff. I don't know whether that's true. I haven't seen any of the polls in detail. But even if we have a runoff, I mean, it's a good, healthy debate.
It seems almost inevitable that both of these are going to go to a runoff at some point here. Is the former mayor, you mentioned, Keisha Lance Bottoms, I'm assuming a friend of yours?
Well, I know her. I know her well.
Okay.
And
will she be a formidable general election candidate running against a Republican?
Well, anyone who wins the nomination is going to be formidable.
Okay.
Because Georgia is not all Democratic and not all Republican. So if you look at the races of Senators Warnock and Ossoff, those were close races.
Yeah.
So we can expect that we would have a close race. I believe that the Democratic Party will rally around the nominee. And whoever that nominee is, and I hope all the candidates who are running will rally around whoever the winner is. The issues of the day are too important for us to be divided. And then afterwards, there'll be a winner. Someone will win the governor's seat, and all of us need to pull in the same direction to make this the best state that it can be.
You mentioned the Supreme Court, which made me think of your state Supreme Court. I didn't expect as much talk as I've been hearing about these 2 Supreme Court seats that are also drawing a lot more people into this race, knowing that there could be a redistricting, a redrawing of congressional districts in the state of Georgia. What do you make of that?
I think it's great.
Yeah?
I think it's great. I mean, Supreme Court justices need to be challenged as well as all of the other judiciary.
These are nonpartisan seats, but it does appear that Democratic-friendly justices could replace them.
Well, I ran as a nonpartisan seat. So the fact that I'm nonpartisan didn't mean that I wasn't a Democrat.
Understood. Sure, exactly.
So I think it's wonderful that we're getting a lot of attention around the courts. I think people in Georgia, and certainly those that I know in Atlanta, are paying more attention to the importance of the third branch of government.
Yeah, how about that? Should Georgia redraw its maps and become part of this movement that's sweeping the nation? Does that make you worry?
Absolutely not.
Not?
Absolutely
What's
not.
going to happen if you do?
I don't know what will happen, but absolutely not. My former boss, Andrew Young, said some really strong words about that. Voting rights, the Voting Rights Act is an attempt to correct wrongs of the past. And I think that the legislature would make a huge mistake.
By eliminating minority districts?
By eliminating...
Do you think that's where we would be headed here in a redrawing?
Well, why else would you redraw them? We don't have a census.
Well, that's right. But it's just a math problem now, right? It's about how many seats you can get for D's and R's. Should Democrats respond in states where they can do it?
I'll leave that to the other states to figure out, but I will tell you that in Georgia, we need to recognize the history of Georgia. We need to recognize Reconstruction. We need to recognize that we were disenfranchised, and that we need to have a level playing field in order to run. We deserve that. African Americans have not been full citizens in the state of Georgia for most of the history of the country, and we need to be represented. But so do other people. So do people from other backgrounds need to be represented. So I'm absolutely firm on that. I'm firm on Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
I'm firm on having controls on the immigration tactics that we're using. And now that I'm not in office, I can say that.
Well, I'm glad you could say it with us. It's great to meet you, and I appreciate you sharing all of your insights today on Bloomberg. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
It's great to meet you. Absolutely.
My
With
pleasure.
us live in Atlanta, the former mayor of this great city, Shirley Franklin, here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg. We've got some breaking news. We're going to be sticking with our primary coverage here in Georgia, but this just crossed the terminal. Elon Musk has lost the case against Sam Altman over the future of OpenAI. This is a big one. Knowing this case, this trial has been underway for days now. Musk losing his bid to force OpenAI to overhaul, with the jury rejecting Elon Musk's OpenAI claims, saying that he sued too late. I think we're going to be going to somebody to talk about this. Who do we have here with this breaking story? If anybody can help me out. All right, Mathieu is joining us right now with more on this. Mathieu, what does this mean for the future of OpenAI?
Hi, Joe. So this is really great news for the future of OpenAI. This lawsuit potentially threatened to hang over the company's head. Elon Musk was seeking court-issued limitations on the company's ability to pursue its for-profit mission, and really to be limited and hamstrung by its original charitable roots. And so this win for the company reduces that risk. It eliminates that shadow potentially hanging over the company. The jury came back with this decision very quickly. It took the case late Thursday after closing arguments. They were off on Friday. They were deliberating this morning and very quickly returned a verdict against Elon Musk. And they didn't even need to reach the merits, the questions, the legal questions. They said on the statute of limitations, did Musk sue too late? Yes, he knew of this earlier and effectively could have sued earlier, and because he sued too late, the whole case gets dismissed. And so it's a complete win for OpenAI, and this risk that potentially could have hung over the company is now out of the way. Potentially Musk could appeal on this, but I think it will be tough to undo a jury decision that the judge immediately adopted as her own view.
Boy, this is really something. The suggestion that he sued too late tells you what, Matt?
I mean, it was always a difficult factual case for Musk because, look, a lot of these negotiations about starting up OpenAI happened in 2016, 2017, 2018, and we're looking at a lawsuit that Musk didn't bring until much after that. And so one of the reasons we have a statute of limitations is that we want parties to act when they have claims, pretty quickly. You can't just sit on these things and then once you want to go after someone, bring it up many years down the road. And so basically what this jury is saying is that, look, even if Musk had a real claim that OpenAI was supposed to operate as a charity, not seek a for-profit mission, you should have brought that claim a couple years ago because you knew about it, effectively the jury's saying, many years ago, and you did nothing about it. And then you sued too late to try to go after it now.
Matt, does this settle the whole question, the whole nonprofit question when it comes to OpenAI?
For purposes of this litigation, it should. Now, as I said, I think Musk could appeal this decision to the Ninth Circuit and try to overturn this jury's decision, but appeals courts have a really hard time second guessing a jury decision. And so I don't think it's very likely that this gets disturbed on appeal. Questions of whether a charity has been misused are typically reserved for state attorneys general. So the California Attorney General could have something to say about it. The Delaware Attorney General could have something to say about it. But in this case, they've both signed off on how OpenAI has proceeded. They've not raised concerns, which was one of the weird things about this case, is typically suits like this would be brought by those states' attorneys general, and they didn't have a problem with it. They did not actively litigate against what OpenAI has done. It was only Musk bringing what he claimed was a breach of charitable trust claim after his contract claim sort of fell away, that was trying to pursue those issues. But this loss, yes, I think basically should end the issue for OpenAI.
All right. Matthew Schettenhelm, who's been all over this story live from Washington. It's great to have you, Matt, in the clutch here. A story that's just breaking with a redhead on the terminal. Elon Musk losing his case against Sam Altman over the future of OpenAI. June Grasso is with us now. If we could get some insights from June, of course, the host of Bloomberg Law, with us from World Headquarters in New York. June, what brought us to this verdict?
Well, I mean, it's been a pretty short trial, actually, and it's because Elon Musk wants to basically, I mean, it would be an existential threat to OpenAI with the things that he's asking for. And it's over whether or not OpenAI and Sam Altman had gone back on a bargain to make OpenAI a charitable trust. But the problem for Musk was that there was no evidence, no documentary evidence that that was the case. There wasn't a contract, there wasn't an email, there wasn't anything like that. So it became a battle of, the credibility of the two main witnesses, Musk versus Altman, and neither of them fared that well on the stand. They both had problems on cross-examination. But in order to find here, they'd have to believe Elon Musk over Altman. What's unusual here is this is a jury verdict on a statute of limitations, saying that when Musk sued, it was outside the statute of limitations. Statute of limitations, for those who don't know, it makes certain claims time-barred for a certain amount of time. So what's unusual is that it's usually the judge who makes decisions before trial about the statute of limitations. So I don't know why she left this for a jury question. I've never seen a jury ask a question about statute of limitations. That's usually a judge decision. In this case, the judge is going to accept their decision. She didn't have to. This is an advisory. It's another unusual thing about this case. The judge has a jury trial, but then she says, this is only an advisory jury verdict. I'm going to make the final decision. And that doesn't happen often. And I have no idea why she decided to do that in this case. But that's also something that's very unusual about this case.
Well, we're going to have a lot more to learn about this, June. Thank you so much for jumping right on with us. June Grasso, live from New York. It's going to be an important next edition of Bloomberg Law on Bloomberg Radio. I'm Joe Mathieu in Atlanta. Didn't think we'd be talking about this necessarily today, but we are talking politics. It's the eve of the primary here in Georgia. We're looking at not only politics, but of course economic trends here in one of the most important states in the nation in this primary cycle. It's a mini Super Tuesday tomorrow, with this being the big one, and we're going to talk about it next with the voice I've been promising all day. Killer Mike is with us. Coming up straight ahead on Bloomberg TV and radio. First, we want to check Wall Street. For that, of course, we turn to Charlie Pellet. He's got the latest from world headquarters in New York on the markets. Charlie, what do you have?
Thank you very much, Joe Mathieu. And right now we are looking at an up day, a volatile day, though, for the stock market. Right now, the Dow is higher by 19 points. That is a gain of under 0.1%. The S&P does remain lower, higher in the early going, but right now down 21 on the S&P, looking at a loss right now of just about 0.3%. NASDAQ Composite Index down 180 for NASDAQ, a drop now of 0.7%. The VIX just above 18 with a 10-year at 4.59%, 2-year currently yielding 4.07%, and the 30-year 5.13%. Right now, we've got spot gold up $8 the ounce, 45.48, higher by 0.2%. West Texas Intermediate crude just below 107 a barrel, now up 1.5%. Brent also below $111 a barrel. It is up by 1.4%. Bitcoin, meanwhile, selling off, down 2.1%. Bitcoin 76,618. As we have been reporting, a California jury has rejected Elon Musk's claim that OpenAI, under Sam Altman's leadership, betrayed its mission to benefit the public by morphing into a for-profit business, finding that he waited too long to bring his claims against the company. Recapping, S&P down by 0.3%. Back we go to Atlanta, where Balance of Power continues, and once again, your host, here he is, Joe Mathieu.
My mom wouldn't buy me in '84. I had to buy myself. So, look how the world progresses.
Charlie, thank you so much. Look who I'm with here. You're not going to believe this. I'm live in Atlanta, Georgia, and there's one person you talk to when you come here about anything. Politics, economy, life, sneakers. He just came, right? From a Puma commercial.
Yeah.
Killer Mike. Mike Render, great to see you.
How you doing, Joe?
In person, no less. I'm great. Last time we came down here for the special election for Senator Warnock, we had a chance to talk.
Yeah.
We were down at Ebenezer.
Yep.
But we weren't together, and it's great to see you at our set here
I'm
today.
absolutely
it's fantastic.
happy to be here
So, look, this is someone who needs no introduction. You're a superstar, Grammy Award-winning artist. You're an actor now.
Yeah.
You've got your own bank. You're also one of the faces of Georgia. Yeah. Tell our audience, people are watching Bloomberg TV all over the world, what they need to know about your state, because tomorrow we're going to be here talking elections, talking issues. What is it that makes Georgia special this time?
Well, I mean, Georgia has the ability to affect the election in a big way, the same way it did. And when I say affect the election, these elections are important first and foremost for Georgia. I want people to think hyper-local. Who are going to be our 2 Supreme Court justices in Georgia, our new ones? We have 2 amazing women that are running.
Yeah.
You know, how are we going to make sure we get Ossoff back in there? First 2 times, I worked like a dog on behalf of his campaign. We got him in. I had a call from him about a week and a half ago, like, hey, you know, looking forward to seeing you out there again. Warnock, who's he and Ossoff have went and done an amazing job hitting the ground. So, you know, I think we got to hit the ground. I think we got to galvanize, plot, plan, strategize, organize, and mobilize our way to the polls. It was important then. It's important now. And ultimately, you know what I understand? We don't have to stay in a perpetual state of fear that we're going to lose it all if we lose an election or this isn't important. My grandmother taught me that it was a civic responsibility to vote. Miss Ellison, who was an absolute tyrant and my civics teacher, taught me to appreciate the Bill of Rights and the Constitution because I had no rights in her classroom. And she made sure that I understood that I was lucky when I got outside the classroom and to exercise those rights. So I'm always encouraged to help people get to the polls. I'm always encouraged by every election, no matter how minuscule and small it is. And I encourage people to do their research. Go on your Google while you're on your lunch break. See who's running in your district, who agrees with you. Talk to your neighbors, see who they want. And you guys, you know, make demands of the politicians that you get in office. The day after they win, they should get a note from you. These are the potholes we want filled this week.
Well, a lot of people must have been talking to their neighbors because 1 million Georgians voted early. That's a record. What do you make of that?
I'm excited, and I know that this state, that has been politically active for a very long time. And I think that whether it was the wise decision of William Hartsfield to give Delta an extended contract here, or the wise decision of Maynard Jackson to say, hey, our own local companies, including being black companies, can build this airport, I think those kind of local decisions have helped make us an international city. So I think that we're going to continue to do that. So go Georgia.
This is a tough time for our economy, which we talk about a lot here on Bloomberg, as you know. You and I spent a lot of time talking about the debanked last time you were on. Even if you have a bank account now, you're dealing with $4.50 gas, you're dealing with mortgage rates, a housing market that won't budge. We're seeing food prices go up now with this war underway, and I'm wondering to what extent that's impacting Atlanta as a city and decisions at the polls tomorrow.
It's impactful. Atlanta has more, I'll give you an example directly from my community. Atlanta has more black millionaires than any other city. Atlanta and D.C. are the top two. You look at Atlanta. With that, we have the greatest wealth disparities, too, between the lowest and highest. We actually are a microcosm of America. America probably has greater economic opportunity than any other country in the world for a person that lands here on a boat 100 years ago or someone that's getting off a plane today. But with that said, we have some of the biggest disparities, and we have lack of education, lack of proper, we have food deserts, we have lack of proper health care. We can fix these things. I think that our mayor in Atlanta, Mayor Dickens, is doing an amazing job of getting people housed. I think that small businesses like the one T I and I have opened called Bankhead Seafood, which employs nearly 40 people, are important. We have millions of small businesses that are in this country. Everyone cannot work for large corporations. So these small and medium businesses, as FIFA comes here and World Cup is here, we're going to have those small and medium businesses, some grow, but we don't want them to go. We want them to keep people employed. So in these tough times, let's make sure we're supporting small and local, because that's who's going to keep people employed. Let's make sure that we demand more of our politicians in terms of, if you look what our mayor's done up in New York, in terms of eliminating some debt and stuff and easing some pressure off people. Let's look at whose candidates are going to do that here, and let's vote for those folks.
I love that you first reached for Supreme Court in your first answer. Because national coverage hasn't gone down to that level in most cases in Georgia, but I'm hearing more about those two Supreme Court seats than just about anything other than the big ones, the gubernatorial and Senate primaries. And it has a lot to do with redrawing maps. People started to really wake up to what they see as a potential opportunity here. Is that why I'm hearing so much about it?
I think
Redistricting?
that is the why. That is the why. And you know what I'm encouraged by in Georgia is because although it's being discussed racially, and it does impact my community from a racial standpoint, because some places it's going to be used to deny, to break up black constituents from proper representation. But I would like to implore right now that the working class understands that the master class or the planter class in the South 300-400 years ago did not care about the poor workers that they were working in the fields, whether they looked like me or you. They didn't care if they were the people that were labeled rednecks that came out of the UK. They didn't care if the people they looked at that they brought from the shores of Africa. They cared about economic domination. And if you think that this is not a working class issue and it is only a racial issue, it will only be so long before you are on the chopping block and there's no one there to advocate an ally. So I would implore the working class right now to make sure that you get people in office that are going to represent for you. And I would encourage the corporate class to make sure that they're fair. Well, what you're going to see is a break in this country that we haven't seen in nearly 100 years.
Well, that's fascinating, because the redrawing of congressional districts, particularly after the Supreme Court ruling on the Voting Rights Act, seemed to be distinctly racial, is it not?
Well, at that time it had to be. I'm just saying that at the time that Martin Luther King was fighting for proper workers' rights and a fair wage for black people in Mississippi, the most underpaid people and people who were resisting him the most were also white Mississippians. At the time that Colin Kaepernick, Skip Bayless did an amazing thing one time, Joe. He said there, I think it was in Pittsburgh, everyone kneeled in solidarity with Colin Kaepernick. One player didn't. I believe it was a white player. The player, of course, patriotic, believed in his country, and that was great. But the NFL is notorious for having a bully pit in terms of negotiations with the Players Association. Skip said that guy doesn't understand, and what he did, he broke solidarity and broke the ability for them to move as a unit beyond this particular issue. So I want to say that even if it feels distinctly racial, understand that if the tactics work on race based on me, it will work on class to you. So I'd say whether you're in the Appalachians or Atlanta, you had better be wary of anybody that wants to redraw.
These are incredibly important points that you're making. Will Georgia redraw? Do you think that's done?
I don't. It's something I disagree with my governor on. You know, and I think he's ruled with a pretty fair hand, and I think he's absolutely wrong on that. And I'll say that to him. I say that on national television. But I think it is not a wise thing to do. I think that Georgia has shown itself to be emotionally intelligent in terms of going in the voting booth. I think that our mayors in Atlanta have done a great job of working with our governors, be they Democrat or Republican, from Joe Frank Harris to Zell Miller on through to our current governor. I think that it throws the balance of Georgia off, and it makes us copy states that are not as progressive as us.
You think politics all day?
No.
Is music a hobby at this point? It's amazing to listen to you.
No, I love, so most of the day I'm thinking, oh my God, how can I make sure this restaurant doesn't cost me any more money? So I'm thinking Bankhead Seafood. I'm thinking music because I'm going to be working on Michael 2 this summer.
Great.
But lately I've been thinking about acting. I've been luckily.
You sure have.
You're not the only handsome guy I get to look in his eyes and we talk. But I get to sit across from Ethan Hawke on a show called The Lowdown.
Yeah.
And I've been brought in for season 2
that
on
fun?
a show called Scarpetta.
Yeah.
It's very fun working with Ethan.
Scarpetta is amazing, by the way.
Scarpetta is an amazing show.
How do you prepare for an acting role differently than you would for a musical show or to sit down and record something?
Well, music, you can record just emotionally, get it out, and then you can go back and learn the song, and you can imitate the emotion.
Interesting.
With acting, it's important that you do what you do in kindergarten, repetition. Let me learn these words. I have to say my ABC perfectly, or my
I have
mom
a horrible
won't let me
memory.
go
I could never
right?
do this.
Right? So your ABC, your mom won't let you go outside till you say all your ABCs,
Exactly.
right? And you have to treat yourself like that. I see why actors and writers have to get along, because you get there in solitude, and then you got a good reading partner. I have a filmmaker friend whose name is Michael Allen, and he reads with me. I have friends in the industry that give me good advice. So I think, more than anything, kindergarten taught you repetition,
how about that?
And once you learn it, put some emotion.
Repetition indeed, but everything we're talking about is a creative exercise that you're involved in. And there are big questions about the way AI is about to change or is already changing this. Whether you're a visual artist, a musician, I was talking to Chuck Lavelle about this a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
You could listen to AI music that's not even made by a person anymore. Is that a good or a bad thing?
Well, I know a producer sent me a track last night that I ended up getting on. It's an amazing track.
Yeah.
He said I couldn't wait for a singer to sing it, so I sang it myself and made AI fix my voice.
Wow.
Oh man, he sounded amazing. I'll never let him sing it live. We're gonna go find a real singer to sing it. But it enabled him to get his idea out. And what I found with technology, and it's interesting because I was just told by the president of Georgia Tech that they're actually bringing a program that teaches technology through creativity. You're going to be able to learn music, but at the same time be learning coding. I think that's absolutely genius. And shouts out to my friend from childhood, Raheem Biya, who's a professor emeritus over here. But what happens is, I think that AI is going to give musicians and artists the ability to have another tool to use their imagination with.
Yes, right.
I can imagine a sketch before I draw it, but the ability to use AI to say, do the sketch and then I'll draw, might work, might help.
That's important, though. So it would augment your work, not replace you as the artist.
I think the possibility there if we take advantage of it.
If we do it right.
If we do it right.
Yeah.
You don't do some wrong before you do it right.
You playing with AI? Is this part of your world? You
Man,
got Claude, you got Gemini?
I am as ignorant as can be. I know as much about his AI as my grandpa knew about an iPhone.
Well, listen, maybe we'll learn together then.
Absolutely.
It means a lot to us that you came all the way here to see us.
It means a lot.
I appreciate having you on Bloomberg. I'm very happy for your success, and I'm looking forward to the next show.
I'm looking forward to seeing you at Bankhead Seafood for a big fish sandwich.
Let's go do that. Absolutely. Can I be there tonight?
Come on.
James, let's
I'll have
get
him
this
open up
together.
a restaurant just for you, and it's an off night.
Tim's coming too.
Yeah.
Amanda, let's get the whole crew together here. Killer Mike with us live on Bloomberg. This is why we came to Atlanta. I'm going to meet you back here on the late edition of Balance of Power. Kaylee Lyons will be here. We're going to have to take a picture for Kaylee with Killer Mike here. And that's, of course, a conversation that you're not going to want to miss on Bloomberg. After the bell, 5 p.m. Eastern from here in Georgia. I'm Joe Mathieu. Bloomberg Business Week is coming up straight ahead, top of the hour here on Bloomberg TV and radio.